classrooms. Just a reminder that if you have your conference notebook.
I'm sorry, it may just be me, but I'm seeing two screens on top of each other with a timer and notes.
Oh, okay, wait a minute. Okay, let me try again. Okay, so.
I'll get the link in just a second. I got to get things opened back up on my computer after having to reboot. I do apologize, guys. Thank you for your patience.
You no longer have echo. That's a good thing.
Yay, that's wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I will get my documents reopened and we'll be able to give you guys all sorts of links and comments now throughout this session. It's funny, we had technical problems yesterday, but they were completely different than these. So thank you for your patience. We appreciate you all being here today. Hope your summer is going well. And while she's doing that, and while I'm opening my links, we just do want to tell you a little bit about Chrissy. She is the ESL lead teacher and instructional facilitator for secondary schools in Lee County, North Carolina, where she provides professional development and coaching for content and ESL teachers in the SIOP method, differentiation for L's, vocabulary building for L's, or MLs, as we're going to now, and various components of Margarita Calderon's Excel methodology. She is a certified trainer for OCDE Project GLAD, which is an evidence-based set of strategies that help with designing classroom lessons where language comes alive through the content. She also helps create classrooms that allow our multilingual learners to be successful, not only in her county, but across the state as part of our EL support team. We haven't renamed that yet, but we will be renaming it soon. She has a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, a teaching license degree. Now I've got maybe Chrissy has to mute for me to talk and not have a review. Can you mute for 1 second, Chrissy? Okay, yeah. She has 9 through 12 social studies degree, a master's in education from Meredith College, and she was nationally board certified from 2005 to 2015. She doesn't look like it, but she has over 20 years of experience in education. And we are very excited. I'm going to be quiet now that her screen is up, and I will begin putting links in the chat for you guys. And again, thank you for your patience. Chrissy.
Okay, thank you, Ivana. So as Ivana said, we had different tech yesterday, so we're hoping for good things today. So just a reminder that you do have your session notebooks, your conference notebooks that you probably downloaded earlier in the week. If not, please make sure you do that because some of our links will be present on our page in the notebook. Also, just a reminder that some CEUs may require some of the artifacts within the notebook. Some districts may require some of the artifacts within the notebook for CEU credit. And so, in having said that, we're just going to move right along. Here is all my contact information. Ivana did a great job of introducing me, so I'm not going to add to that, but I am super excited to get to use my content knowledge and my English as a second language specialist knowledge for this presentation. Here are our session objectives. So by the end of our session, we're hoping that we'll be able to state the purpose, format, content, and location of the mapping document, that we'll be able to define the key language uses in a variety of different ways, that we'll be able to use the mapping document to plan for some integrated content and language lessons, and that we'll be able to write an integrated content and language objective. So those are our goals for today. We are going to begin with just a very quick overview of the English Language Development Standards. I know that many of you have been in sessions earlier in the week. We're just going to quickly review the important pieces for our session today. But before we begin that, we want to just get an idea about the collaboration that you use in your context and how frequent that might be and what it looks like. So I have a quick poll here I'm going to ask you to complete for me. How many hours do you spend collaborating with your ELD specialist or your content specialist at your school? A, 1 hour a week, B, 1 hour a month, C, an hour a semester, less than an hour a semester, or E, I don't collaborate with my colleagues. So if you will just take a look and place your responses in the chat box for me, either you can do A, B, C, D, or E to let me know what collaboration looks like in your context. Okay, so I'm seeing lots of A's. A couple of B's. I'm honestly seeing, and we're seeing just a whole range because I see some C's, I've seen some D's. I don't think I've seen any E's, which is awesome. So we are doing some collaboration. An additional question, is the collaboration you do mainly with other ESL specialists or with content specialists? If you'll just type either content or language specialist. Okay, so I'm seeing, again, a whole gamut. Some of us are interacting with our ESL specialist peers, and then some of us are interacting with both, some with just content. What are some, you guys, thank you so much. What are some challenges that you face when you interact, when you try to create a collaboration, when you try to collaborate with your colleagues? What are some challenges you face? Always we see time, absolutely. Time is always a factor in collaboration. When we're talking about our content peers, our content colleagues, what are some challenges you face with your content colleagues in particular? Flexibility. So still some time. Okay, I see. Okay, awesome, awesome. You guys are so wonderful. I am watching so many chats. We are ready to go this morning. So I'm seeing some comments that still talk about time, but I'm also seeing some comments that regard, you know, maybe not a familiarity with multilingual learners. Maybe not a familiarity with the language within their content. So the mapping document is going to help address that. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about your challenges as ESL specialists and lead teachers. Sometimes working with content teachers can be difficult because we're coming from two places, two different skill sets, and it's hard to meet in the middle. So we're going to look at the mapping document as a way to do that. Thank you so much. So the mapping document, when we think about the 4 big ideas behind the English language development standards, the mapping document is going to address 2 of these very well. The first one is going to be integration. So the mapping document is going to support teachers in being able to integrate both content and language into their instruction. It's also going to support collaboration, which is what we just talked about. Ivana, I see someone asking for the slide deck link, if you wouldn't mind posting that. Thank you. It also supports collaboration because it provides a starting point. Sometimes when we get together and we start to have discussions, we're coming from 2 different perspectives and points of view. It's hard to get on the same page. The mapping document is going to help us get started with those discussions and those collaborative meetings. So that is how the document supports those 4 big ideas. Very quickly, we just want to review our North Carolina language expectations and the components of each of those. So our first component is going to be the language expectation itself. And this basically just describes the language that's necessary to complete the academic standard. We're also going to see the grade level cluster in our nomenclature, or our coding there. This was 6 to 8. We see our key language use, which is one of the 4 within the English language development standards. This one is narrate, and these are, again, the big language uses found in the K-12 content curriculum. And then finally, we're going to see that communication mode, which in this case is interpretive. So let's take a moment and just review very quickly those modes of communication, because that's going to be an important part of our session today and using those in our planning. So there are 2 modes of communication, interpretive and expressive, within the standards, the ELD standards. The interpretive is going to deal mainly with listening and reading and also viewing. This is going to be information coming in that the students need to be able to understand or interpret and make meaning of. We have our other communicative mode, which is expressive, and this is going to be language going out or being produced. Usually that's done in writing and speaking, but also our standards have included representing as a method for doing that. And these are ways to share ideas or produce language. Any questions about that quick review? Okay. If not, we're going to move on and dive right into our North Carolina mapping document.
Before you do that, Chrissy, I just wanted to say that there were some comments about content teachers, if you don't mind muting for a second. If there were some comments about content teachers not understanding. Chrissy, are you muted? Are you able to mute?
Yes.
Content teachers not understanding language acquisition for our multilingual learners. Let me start my video. So I did put in the chat, please invite these content teachers to join us on Friday. Friday is our content strand. So we will be giving this information, but we'll be tailoring it to our content teachers. So if you look in the chat, I included the registration link that you can send to your content teachers. And we would really, really love for you to spread that word. It's 2 hours out of their day. And it would be wonderful. So thank you, Chrissy. We just need to remember that if I talk, you mute, and then I'll try to be quiet. But I hope you guys heard what I said. We really, really, really hear you. And this mapping document is the perfect way for us to help our content teachers begin to understand more about language acquisition. So the link is in the chat. Please send an email, invite them to come on Friday. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're super excited about Friday's session with our content colleagues. So thank you, Ivana, for sharing that. So as we jump into the mapping document, it's located on the North Carolina ELD Standards Resource Hub, which, Ivana, if you could place the link in there in the chat box. So if you go to the hub, you're going to see, once you click on the mapping icon, you're going to see that there are 4 mapping documents, one for social and instructional language, one for language arts, math, science, and social studies, which are the 5 general standard statements in our ELD standards. Okay, and as you click on each, you'll be able to see, I click on the mathematics one, take you right into the standards and the document. And so we will be using that document. We'll be going back and forth between the mapping documents. So you may want to go ahead and just leave up the tab here so that you can just jump right into the activities. I am sorry, my oh, sorry. So now let's take a look at how our mapping document is laid out, how it's formatted, because we want to be really familiar with that, since we're going to use it later in the session to make some language objectives and to plan some for a lesson. So as we look here, you're going to see that the first column is the language expectation. And you can see your nomenclature at the top of the language expectation. Again, the ELD, ELA standard, language arts here, the grade span 2 to 3, the key language use, and our communication mode, which in this case is interpretive. You're also going to see the grade level or course-specific content standards. So here you'll see second grade, and these are the content standards for language arts in second grade that match nicely with this language expectation. Now, this is not a complete exhaustive list, but this is a great start. The document is a great start. Also, you'll see third grade, and the third grade content standards that match nicely with the language expectation here. So this is how our document is laid out. Now what I'd like to do is for us to just kind of walk through the mapping document together. So I'm going to ask that you walk through with me so that you get a chance to explore the document at the same time I am. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to go to the hub where you had your mapping documents. I'm going to ask you to find the mapping document for the language of math, which is our ELD Standard 3, and I'm going to ask you to select that. That is going to pull up our mapping document. Now, just a note, if you download the document, you see the links here in blue. If you download the document, you can actually click on the links and it will take you to the appropriate grade span. So that's a nice quick shortcut as you're navigating the document. So just please be aware of that as you use it. I'm going to go ahead and download mine so we can use that feature. Okay. So next we're going to find the ELD standard for second grade. So we're going to go to our math. We're going to click on the second to third grade. And that's going to take me right to the second grade math language expectations and where they begin. Pause here just for a minute to let everybody kind of get where I am. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to try to locate a language expectation for the key language use of explain. Well, it just so happens that explain is the first one listed here. So we can see that this is an ELD math, second to third grade language expectation for explain. Now we want to look for an language expectation that has a communicative mode of expressive. The first one that we land upon is interpretive. So I'm going to ask you just to kind of scroll down until you can find an expressive. Oops, I found one. What do you notice about the expressive columns on the document? How are they different from the ones that were interpretive right above it? Somebody can unmute, or you can put in the chat box. How are they different visually? Good, it's blue. So the expressive will be in blue on the mapping document. So that's another way to help you kind of navigate the document. So now we have found an ELD Math second to third grade explain expressive language expectation. Now we need to find a content standard that connects for second grade. Here's my second grade column. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to just copy and paste let's do this. Yes, I'm just going to ask you to copy and paste the second grade content objective that is correlated to the language expectation, to an explain expressive language expectation. So take a minute. Okay, I'm sorry, let me clarify. I'm going to ask you to take, you see here is our language expectations that are expressive and are for the key language use of explain. I'm going to ask you to find a content standard that matches one of these language expectations. So I might choose this one here. I might choose this one here. If I scroll on down to the next page, here's another one. All of these will pair with an explain expressive language expectation. Anyone have any questions? So copy and paste that and just place it in the chat box so that I know you got to the same place I got in your mapping document. There they go.
Yay, it's working.
Yay. Wonderful. We did it. Awesome. So that was just a quick kind of walkthrough to allow you to see, to allow you to kind of navigate the document itself. So we have some experience because one of our objectives was to be able to navigate that. So any questions about the format of the document or how to navigate it? Wonderful. We are moving right along. Great. So now our next step in the process is, now that we know the mapping document, we know its format, we have played on it and done some searches on it. Now what we're going to do is really look at the language of the content standards. And that, because that is what this ELD mapping document is, one of its purposes is to show how the language and the content match together. So as I mentioned previously, the key language uses are the 4 most common language uses in the K-12 content curriculum standards. They are narrate, inform, argue, and explain. And these are really the first opportunity for that connection between content and language to happen. Some of the connections are simple to see. For example, in this North Carolina math standard, automatically I look at the standard and I see the verb explain. So my mind immediately goes, oh, I have a key language use that's explain also. So those probably work well together. Okay. However, sometimes that connection is not so easily seen, and that's why we created the mapping document. Sometimes it's the verb we see may not match one of our key language uses. Sometimes a verb we do see, like explain, may be one of the key language uses, but we may need to access others as well. That's why our Venn diagram shows that overlap. So for example, in the course of explaining how to solve an addition or subtraction problem, I need to explain addition and subtraction and how to work those problems. in the ability to do that, while I'm doing that, I also need to be able to inform sometimes. I may need to inform someone about how to line up the numbers in a math problem. So sometimes the verb itself will get you to one of the key language uses, but it may also touch upon the others. So we want to really dive into these key language uses a little bit. In many content standards, the connection is not so explicitly shared as it was in the slide we just looked at. The verb does not explicitly match the 4 language uses. If we look at these 2 math standards, we see the words compare and recognize. They don't match one of our 4 key language uses. So it's really important that we know and explore these key language uses, and we can so that we can kind of match these other verbs we see. Compare. So compare, where would that fall? Well, compare could fall in inform, because I may be informing about similarities and differences. So compare could be matched with the language use of inform. So we have to be able to make those connections even though it's not obvious. And because of that need to do that, we are going to explore those key language uses a little bit further. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if Ivana will put the link to the Padlet in the chat box, I'm going to ask you to join me on my Padlet. Okay, hang on, hang tight. Okay. And let's see if okay, great. So now that we're on our Padlet, let's kind of explore some specific components of each key language use, because this is going to be really important to have a firm understanding so we can match those other verbs and those other language objectives, or content objectives rather, to our language expectations. So I see, okay, I'm just going to ask you to be patient with me for one moment.
While you're doing that, if we don't get too much feedback, I wanted to share some of the comments in the chat. People have been helping each other out with the language of math. So thank you so much for doing that. I saw someone ask what some of the abbreviations meant, and other people were helping each other, and people were talking about math isn't their thing. And, you know, we're all language learners, no matter what language it is we're working on. So thank you. I thought that was a great interchange amongst participants. You need me to keep rambling? When you're ready, you just unmute and jump back on.
Okay, thank you. I just realized I did not wipe out the previous group's answers, so maybe we'll just add to them.
So are we able to keep going with adding to it?
Yes, I am trying to get back to my Padlet. There we go. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and let's look at the purpose of narrate, for example. The purpose of narrate, the key language use. What would we say the purpose is? We can see here that some people have said recount an event, retell, tell a story. Think a moment and see if you have any ideas for other purposes for narrate. What might be a reason to narrate? Okay, and I'm just going to ask you, for example, I might think about the purpose of narrating might be to maybe it's to entertain. So I would click on well, now it's not letting me.
What's wrong?
It is now not letting me add a comment.
Are the participants able to add comments?
It is allowing
Oh,
us
I
to
see
add
it. I
comments.
see it. I didn't scroll down. Thank you so much. Sorry. I had a technology moment. So for example, so I see some putting in some purposes. So we've got a personal narrative. I see someone. I might put a purpose of a narration is to entertain. Okay, so take a moment and see if you can add a couple of what is the purpose of the key language use narrate. Okay, so I'm seeing some to establish a common context for further thinking. Absolutely. I see to share your side, point of view. I love it. To share your side of an event or story. I'm seeing the word recount. Okay. Now let's go down and let's see about associated words. So what words do you associate, if we go down to the next box, what words do you associate with narrate? So I see, for example, some previous participants put a chronicle, some put a story sequence, some put beginning, middle, and end. These are words that these additional words are words that might show up in our content objectives that can help us pair them. So those are awesome. See if you can add a couple to our list here. I'm going to scroll down. If you scroll down to the bottom, oh, I see them. Character, list, narrate is to list. Time ordered words. Oh, you guys are giving me some language features. Wonderful. Setting might be a part of narrate. Absolutely. These words are words that might show up in our content standards that might give us a clue or an idea about where we are, about where we might make that connection. Wonderful. How about examples? Let's move down to the third category under narrate, examples. So we've got memoirs and autobiographies written here. Some people have fairy tales, soap operas. What are some that you think of? What are some examples that you might use in different content areas? Like, for example, as a social studies teacher, diary entries are the first things I think about. So take a moment and add a couple to our list there. Math story problems, I love it. Word problems, comic strips, blogs. Oh, I love it. Letters, journal entries, oh my gosh, we have such an awesome list here. Wonderful. All right, let's go down to our final category, which are classroom activities. So what types of activities might you use when you are exploring this key language use of narrate? Some of our previous participants have put journaling, prompts, sketching, we have writing a personal narrative, creating a foldable. What are some that you can add? So take a moment and add a couple to our list here. Reader's theater, I love it. Popcorn stories, I love it. Dialogues, writing dialogues into a picture. Oh, that's awesome. Absolutely. Or writing, starting with the picture and writing the story from it. Absolutely. A personal spin. You guys did a great job. We've got an awesome list here. I just have to say, Ivana, maybe it was a good idea. Maybe it was divine intervention that I accidentally didn't reset it.
That's great.
We have a wonderful list that we can reference and use when we're making those connections.
And someone just said in the chat, would love for you not to reset the list.
Done. That was divine intervention. Thank you so much. There are so many things that I never thought of when I started brainstorming. So the power of collaboration is seen here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is give you a couple of minutes to go through the other 4 key language uses: inform, explain, and argue. And I'm going to ask you to just read what's there, and see what other ideas you can add that will help make this very expansive for us to use when we're trying to really make those connections with content and language expectations. So I'm going to give you about 4 minutes. Or actually, let's do about 3 minutes since we had a little technology this morning. About 3 minutes to read and add some to our Padlet. Okay, guys, you have done, I've just been sitting here smiling as I go through these. You guys have done an excellent job adding to this. I can't wait for our content teachers to get here, because by the time they get here on the 4th day, on Friday, they're going to have so much information to help make those connections. Some really original things, I have seen words like rhetoric. I've seen things like bias. For our argue column. Our inform column has lots of different verbs that have associated words like define and describe. So you guys have just done an absolutely wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job of unpacking these key language uses. And that's so important, as I said, because that's really understanding those key language uses is how is what the team thought about when they started to make those connections with the mapping document. And as I said, it's not an exhaustive list. So you may come upon a need to go to that content standard and make those connections yourself. Awesome. Any questions about the key language uses? If not, I just want to show you a quick chart that will help you understand, to make sure we kind of understand which language uses are included in the ELD standards, the North Carolina ELD standards. So what you see here is a distribution of key language uses in grade 1. And these can be found in your WIDA manual, which we're going to provide the link to that a little later in the session. And it has the charts for all of the grades in it. This one is for grade 1. So what you're going to see is you're going to see that along the side of the distribution table, you'll see each of the ELD general standard statements, the 5 areas that we teach language through. And then you're going to see at the top, okay, I'm missing an arrow. At the top, you're going to see the narrate, inform, explain, and argue, which are our key language uses. And then you're going to see in each row, you're going to see dots. If the dot is colored in, like the one that is highlighted on the screen for the language of mathematics, that means that that particular language use for grade 1 is shows up in the content standards very, very, very often. It is most prominent. Okay, so our ELD standards are definitely going to include language expectations for inform. You might also see a half-filled circle, like the one shown here. This one is for the key language use of explain. That half-filled or half-bubbled dot means that it's prominent, which means it shows up somewhat frequently within the content standards for math for 1st grade. And then, of course, you're going to see the circle that's not filled in, that's completely white. And that means that it's present, which means it doesn't show up very often in grade 1. So narrate doesn't show up very often in the content standards for math in grade 1. And I think that makes sense to us. So the ELD standards are only going to include those language uses that are completely filled in circles, those most prominent. So for example, in the language of mathematics, we're going to see inform, we're going to see key language uses in 1st grade. We're going to see language expectations in the standards for 1st grade for the key language use of inform. That is the only key language use that will be in language expectations for 1st grade math, because it is the most frequently used. So the standards focus on the ones that have the most prominent circles. So take a look now at science, the language of science for 1st grade. Type in the chat box what key language uses will be in the ELD standards. There should be 2. Type that in the chat box. Awesome, good job. I saw somebody. Oh, there they come. Good job. Inform and explain. There will not be a narrate language expectation for first grade science because that is not there very frequently. Awesome, you guys are doing a great job. So this is just to help you understand that when you go to your mapping document, you may not see all of the language expectation column may not have all of the key language uses, and that is because they are not the most prominent. And you guys got it right. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to jump now into our using the North Carolina mapping document to find connections between content and language. So we're going to actually use our mapping document now. Okay, so we're going to practice matching a content standard to our language expectation. So the first thing you're going to do is decide on your content focus for the lesson. In this case, I have chosen that we're going to do science. That is going to be our content focus. We're going to select the mapping document that we would need to explore. Remember, we went to our page and we saw the 5 documents. And we are going to need to locate the grade level that the lesson is for, or that we'll be teaching. For this particular practice, I've chosen grade 4. So I would need to scroll down to the 4th grade section, just like we did in our practice run this morning. Next, you're going to need to locate the language function that you wish to teach and find your language expectations. So for my lesson, I'm going to be working with students to explain a scientific phenomena. So here's a language expectation that asks the students to explain using descriptions or observations about a science phenomena or data. Now that I have located my grade, I have decided as an ESL specialist which language expectation I want to target. I'm going to target the key language use of explain. I want them to be producing language, so I've chosen expressive. And then I have selected my specific language expectation, and then what is boxed in blue is my actual language function, okay, which we're going to explore functions a little more in a moment. So now all that is left to do is to look for a corresponding content standard that I can teach this language expectation through. So we are going to, for our example, I'm going to choose this one that explains how minerals are identified using tests for physical properties of hardness, color, luster, cleavage, and streak. Now I have my 2 objectives, my content, and I have my language expectation. I have it ready to go to start creating my lesson. I'm going to go to my language specialist artifact. Ivana, do you mind putting, this is in your notebook. There is a link in your notebook on our page. Yesterday, some people had some problems. Some people could open the link, some could not. So Ivana, if you don't mind, if you will put that link in the chat box for us. I'm seeing some people commenting about sound quality. I'm going to try to make sure I keep my head straight forward. Maybe that will make us make the sound a little clearer. What you're going to do once you have use the mapping document, you have chosen your language expectation, you have found a content standard that will correlate with it. You're going to then copy and paste it into your artifact, your participant artifact, just like I've done here. Place my ELD standard language expectation here, place my objective here. Now it's your turn. Do we have any questions about what you'll be doing? I'm going to give you maybe about 5 or 6 minutes to try to find a language expectation you would like to teach and find a content standard that matches it using the mapping document. Any questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any in the chat box, I don't think. The slide document is view only. That would be great. Thank you. I absolutely love it. In the words of Ivana, thank you so much for presenting a problem and a solution. So someone said, could we place it in our conference notes? Absolutely. That's an excellent place to place it. Or you can open a Google slide, a Google Doc, and copy and paste them there as well. That'll work. I apologize. I need to make a note of that. Awesome. Could I model how to write a content and language objective using this document? So we are going to actually, the very last portion of the session is actually going to talk about how to make an integrated content and language objective, which is taking your 2 SciUp objectives and blending them into one objective. So we are going to address that. I absolutely love SciOp. I've trained on it for many years. I would love to help you do that as well in office hours this afternoon. So if you would like to visit me at 3:30 in our office hours, we could work on that and get a good process going for it. That's an awesome idea. Okay, so I'm going to start our 5 minutes about right now. If you have any questions, I'll be watching the chat box, and so will Ivana. We will come back together at 10:03, and then we'll see if anybody wants to share share their experience and making how their experiences, any challenges they had, how well they were able to do this. Okay, link to mapping document again. Okay, so I'm gonna mute and let you guys work, and we will man the chat box and try to take care of your needs there. Okay, I see lots of good questions. That tells me you guys are hard at work in the chat box. I did place a new link that in the chat box for the document itself, because we will be going back and forth to it. So if you weren't able to open it, if it was view only in the notebook, if you click on that link, it should prompt you to make a copy so you can type directly into the artifact. So hopefully that will help. Okay, with that being said, hopefully you were able to get your content and language matched up, and we're going to go ahead and move forward. Any questions about that process? Wonderful, I'm glad to see we've got it. Any questions about that process? Anybody want to just share? How hard was it to do? How easy was it to do? Challenges you might have had in finding? Okay, so I think that silence probably means we did a good job of matching those, and we found it relatively doable. So that's wonderful. We're going to go ahead and move into the planning part for language development. So now we have created, we have our content, we have our language, we know what's going to work together, but now we need to explicitly look at that language expectation and think about how we're going to actually plan to develop the language in that language expectation. What we're going to start out with doing is just reviewing the language expectation and its anatomy. So if we look at this language expectation, you're going to see that in purple, there is what we're going to call the stem. And the stem is going to give like the most basic information about that language expectation. So one thing it's going to show us is the communication mode. So we see the word construct, which we know means to produce. So that's going to make our communicative mode expressive. We're also going to see in that stem the content area that the language expectation is addressing. So we see language arts. We're also going to see the key language use. So we're going to be constructing narratives. So that lets us know that we are using the key language use of narrate. So those components make up the stem, what we're going to call the stem. The next component of that language expectation is going to be the language function. And the language function is it's the common pattern that is used for schooling, that is used for a specific a pattern for a specific key language use that students will use for different purposes in schooling. So if we see the language function here, we're going to see that it is to develop stories with time and event sequences, complication, resolution, and ending. So that's our language function. That's the pattern we can find within a narrative that we're going to work on producing. That's our purpose. Next, we're going to go to the third component, which is the language feature. And these are the specific grammar structures or grammar resources that you're going to need to use to accomplish our language function. So if I'm going to develop a story with time and event sequences, then I'm going to show conflict and the resolution of conflict. I'm going to have to use verbs that are going to describe what characters are doing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Those are going to help me accomplish my language function. That language feature is going to be the specific language that you're going to build instruction on, that you're going to give to the students to help them meet that language expectation. So those are the three components that we're going to be referencing in this session. Any questions about any of those features? We're going to address them again a little later on. Okay. I am not seeing any. Okay, so we're going to move on. So we're going to jump into the language features because the language features, as I said, are extremely important. They are the explicit piece of language instruction we're going to need to provide for our multilingual learners. And sometimes this can be the most challenging or most complicated element to find in that language expectation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at just the definition again. So again, I have my language function, which is a pattern that is commonly found in that key language use area. So for a narrative, commonly we're going to use events, event sequences, we're going to use time, we're going to have conflict, and then we're going to have, we want to be able to create a story that has those pieces. In order to do that, we have to have our language features. And these can be types of sentences, they can be clauses, they can be phrases, they can be words. Again, these are the language features that we're going to focus on trying to instruct on. So now let's look at an example of how all of these pieces fit together. So here is an English language arts mapping document, a SNP. And we can see the second grade content standard here, which asks students to describe how characters in a story can respond to events and challenges. This can easily be connected to our language function, which is the component right after the colons in our language expectation. We see how similar those are. So in my ELA lesson, I'm going to target both of these skills, but I have to determine the language features that will be needed to develop the elements of a story. What specific information and skills will I need to explicitly teach to be able to allow my students to develop that story? Okay, think on that for a moment. One way that can be helpful to determine language features that you want to target, because the mapping document does not give you language features. Those features are things as language specialists that we have to come up with on our own. And those are important components of what we do. So we're going to work, I'm going to show you an example of a way to help find those features if you're struggling. So one way is to actually, one way, and I see some people already with the answers, which is absolutely correct. I see in the chat box. What explicit language features are we going to use to teach the standard? I love it. You guys are my gifted pupils. You already are ahead of the game here. This might be a way also, if you're very familiar with them, this is a way I tell my content teachers to find their language features. That is that I ask them to produce a language sample of what they're asking the students to do. If you're asking them to explain it orally, what would your explanation sound like? Now let's dissect it and look for language features. Here is a writing sample that I'm going to use as an example for that. Sometimes you can find a text itself, a story itself that achieves these components of the language function. So let's take a look at, to be able to effectively convey time and event sequence, it's necessary to use connectors. And I saw some people, oh, look at you guys with your language features. One of the first ones I saw pop up in the chat box were these connectors, the sequencing connectors. Then, next, then, those are one language feature I could choose. I might also choose, if I want to be able to convey the events and the conflicts that impact the characters, I might find it necessary to use verbs that describe what characters do, think, and feel, which was part of our sample objective earlier. So you can see here my verbs. I saw someone mention in the chat box, verb tenses, absolutely, would be a great thing to target. And then I might even decide if I want to continue to convey that resolution piece, I might, excuse me, choose to target verbs and adjectives that help the reader judge behavior or situations that look like these: excited, noisy, buzzing with talk. So these are the language features or structures that I might choose to target depending on the language proficiency of my multilingual learners and my content standard. Okay. And I see, and I'm just going to call it, I'm going to comment on one of the comments in the chat box. I see that someone said if participants have an essential question, then have them write the answer they want from the students. Absolutely. And that was, that's absolutely. What's the perfect answer? Tell your content teacher, what's the perfect answer? Write it for me. Now let's look at the perfect answer and let's find out what language features you used so we can teach those. So that is an awesome, very, very important thing. And I know we've got our lead teachers here today. That is an awesome way to do that. That finding an example in a text, writing a response to a prompt yourself, all of those are great ways to do that. So awesome, awesome, awesome. So now what we're going to do is we are going to try one together. Okay, so we're going to look at this excerpt from the math mapping document. And I knew we had some math people in our participants because I saw them supporting us. I will probably need support as a past social studies teacher. Math is a struggle for me. So that's why we chose second grade standards. Let's take a look at this excerpt from the mapping document. We see that the content standard or objective is to compare two three-digit numbers based on their place values. And we're going to use the less than, greater than, or equal to symbols to record our comparisons. So that's our content. Now this standard is connected to this language function of generalize commonalities across cases. We are going to, so as we look at the language expectation, I see the word commonalities, I see comparisons in the content standard. These two standards are asking us to really compare and show similarity. So having thought that, what are some good language features that I might be able to add to or be able to use in my instruction? What are some language features? So think about it, and in the chat box, type some language features that you might teach if you are focusing on comparison. I see words, definitions of greater than, equal to, less than. Suffixes, I love it. Your comparatives, ER and EST. Place value, using really technical words that are very precise, like place value. You could talk about superlatives, absolutely. So you guys are AIG. I'm going to throw in the ones I had here. So I had comparatives also. I had demonstratives. So in order to point out things, they might use these, that, both. And then conditional structure. So if you're telling your conclusions that came about, you might say, if we do this, then, or when we do this. But same and alike, some vocabulary. I saw conditionals. You guys are so awesome. Absolutely. Those are our language features. Absolutely. We want to, I saw Ms. Castillo mentioned, we want to make sure we're keeping that rigor over the regular classroom expectations. And one way we do that is by teaching this language piece, because this language is what allows our multilingual learners to really access that content. And that's what we want to share with our content teachers. So now we are going to practice. And because I thought I wanted to give you a nice scaffolded way to practice, because sometimes language features are a little complicated, we are going to actually use a Jamboard. And so, and as to do this in the least complex way possible, because we had technology problems yesterday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the Jamboard link in the chat box. If you will click on the Jamboard link, it will bring up the option to make a copy. And I'm going to let you make a copy so that you can manipulate your own Jamboard. Jamboard will only allow 25 participants on a board at one time. So because we have a really big group today, this was our alternative way to allow you to practice. So if you will click on that Jamboard, hold on. You will go to,
It says we do not have access to it when I click.
oh, okay, hang on. Well, when you click on it, you don't have access to it. Does it prompt you to make a copy?
Yes, you have to make a copy.
And when you make a copy, you should be able to access it because it's yours at that point. Does the link prompt you for a copy?
No,
There we go.
no, right now it says we're sorry, we do not have access to Jamboard web and mobile apps. Please contact your organization. Oh, that's my problem, it looks like.
I'm not sure, maybe that's possibly a computer. Sometimes if
Make a copy and it's working now.
okay,
Yeah.
awesome, wonderful,
think.
okay. So we are going to, you should see it make, I'm gonna walk through here. You should see it say make a copy. You'll click make a copy.
Yeah, no, I think my organization is restricted from using the Jamboard.
Okay, I understand. That might happen. Sometimes Chromebooks also interact kind of oddly with WebEx. So you should pull up, and if you can't pull up a copy, I'm going to project everything on the screen. So you can kind of work through that as well. So here are our directions. What you're going to do is you're going to read each language function. If you've not used Jamboard before, you navigate the slides up here with the arrow. We're going to read the language function that we see here. Remember, that's the point after the colon. We're going to read each language function. We're going to look at our sticky notes and decide which two language functions would support this first one for language arts 2 to 3 inform expressive, this first one, which two? And we're going to read them and we're going to move them to where they go. Okay, and I didn't move mine with any order, so I want you to take a moment and practice. Okay, so you try to match the language features to the language expectations. We're going to take about maybe 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. We'll see how you're doing to let you match these, and then we're going to come back and check. And I may ask those of you, since we have such experts with us today, to kind of explain why you matched what you matched together. Okay, so take a moment. I'm going to mute. If you need any support, I will be here. Just communicate through the chat box, and we will come back together at 10:25. Okay, hopefully you had an opportunity to navigate and play around. There is an additional matching that you can practice a little more behind it. So I'm wondering if I can have somebody who is confident enough to share, to unmute and share, and you can just unmute or raise your hand if you'd like, and share what 2 stickies you chose for language features for our language arts, adding details to define, describe, compare, and classify. Somebody want to raise their hand, or you can type your name in the chat box if you want to, if you would like to help us out. Okay, I see Schofield. Stephen Schofield. Mr. Schofield, would you like to unmute and share how you match them? Thank you. Mr. Schofield, are you able to unmute?
I can't hear him if he did.
I can't either. Okay. Sorry, not now. Okay, no worries. That's fine. Technology is a wonderful thing when we can get it to do what we want to. How about someone, let's type in the chat box. What is one, to start, give me the first like 3 words of one of the stickies you placed with this in the chat box. Oh, I can't, okay, I see. Well, Kezia will let you do the very next one. Signal words too, absolutely. And I see prepositional phrases, absolutely. So these make sense. If we are going to add details that compare, we need to know, we need to be able to show comparison. We need those signal words, bigger than, fastest, more colorful. These types of things, absolutely. Those would be a language target or feature we would want to teach. Also, prepositional phrases. If we're going to describe, we have to be able to tell where they are or when it's happening. So we have those prepositional phrases. Absolutely. Some people are given some thought processes. Ms. Castillo says that she compared the vocabulary signal words to the inform language use. Awesome. Okay. Miss Kezia, I believe it is, my chat box went up. Miss Kezia, would you like to unmute and tell us how you match the math one?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
For the math one, the first one, I did it a little bit different because I used the signal words for
Okay.
the math, just to justify the conclusion and use a comparison with bigger and fastest and more colorful because it's math, so they can compare that. I also use the technical nouns to add precision, and like the signal words I can use it for both, but the cultural connectors and because, so, then that means to present the others, the tallest rectangles, that I use for language features for math only. I don't know if that makes sense. The signal words can be used for both. The technical nouns can be used for both. And
Absolutely.
then the partial connectors for math.
Wonderful. So she's, I'm hearing her say she connected the technical nouns. We would definitely need that to be able to refer and explain or justify or argue how we completed a step. We would also need those causal connectors. And she said we would need signal words possibly, depending on what our math content standard was. So absolutely. So these are just an example of how you might match some language features. And again, you guys are doing really great with the language feature component. So As I said, if you go to the slide 4, you can practice some more if you'd like. What we're going to do now is go to the next slide will show you a little chart that divides, that basically provides all of the components that we're going to need to be able to write our integrated content and language objective, which is where we're headed in our next piece. So you can see here I have my STEM, construct informational text and language arts, that. The STEM ends at that semicolon. Then I see my language function, add details. Then I see my language feature that we just used to match, that was on the sticky notes. There are those signal words. And then I want to make sure I have used my mapping document to put a content standard that can be paired with it or corresponded with it. Once I have all of these pieces, I am ready to dive into creating an integrated content and language objective, which is where we are headed. Okay. So just a quick temperature check. Take a look at how do you feel about these components, the STEM, the language expectation, the language features, and then the ability to match it to a content standard. How are you feeling right now? Do you feel like you have got it all right? You feel like, maybe I'm getting there, or do you feel like I'm lost? How about type that into the chat box just so I can see how we're doing? Okay, I'm seeing some maybes. Need some more practice? Absolutely. It is something that will take practice. We're getting there. Good. I need more practice. Will I review the STEM? Absolutely. Absolutely. Getting there. Good. Okay, so we're all right where we should be. We're right in that maybe I'm getting there. And I'm seeing a lot of people say I need more practice. Absolutely. Please feel free to join me this afternoon in office hours, and we can practice away. So please feel free to do that. I would love to have you. Also know that that I have that additional practice there. I have some other Jamboards with components where you can match the features if that's the particular piece that you are struggling with. Someone asked me about the STEM. So I'm just going to go back really quickly to show you the STEM. Just so you can see, because that is a all right, if you look here, the STEM is this piece right here. Construct informational text and language arts, that. This is the STEM. And remember, in our very first slide, we said that the STEM is going to tell us the communicative mode, construct, which tells us that it's expressive, because that's production. Informational text, there's our key language use. In language arts, there's our content area. So this is the STEM piece. The language function is what comes right after your semicolon, right here. Add details to define, describe, compare, and classify. That is our language function portion. And it's going to tell us the specific pattern that is often used for the purpose of informing. Well, did that help with the questions about the STEM? Any other questions? I'm seeing someone ask about joining the afternoon hours, and Ivana is going to share that with us at the very end of the session. So absolutely, we will talk about those afternoon hours. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think that maybe clarified what we needed. So we are going in the efforts of time, because I know that yesterday a lot of our participants really wanted time to practice the language objectives. On your participant artifact, box 3 and 4 has you look at the two standards, your content and your language expectation, and to find features that would support that language expectation and list them, and then to think about some ways that you could teach those language features. So 3 and 4, we're not gonna stop and give time for you to complete those on the artifact. But again, I'll be glad to work this afternoon with you in office hours to do that if you'd like. But in the effort of time and to get to those language objectives, we're going to go ahead and progress forward. One thing I did want to share with you about language features is if you look in the WIDA manual, the PDF manual, they give some support for language features, and this might be handy for you to share with your content teachers. Ivana, if you don't mind, would you put that link in the chat box? So the WIDA manual breaks these standards apart in great detail. And one of the resources that it offers is it gives sample language features. So for example, here you see 2nd and 3rd grade mathematics, which is what we were just working with. You see that it has all of the interpretive language expectations, all of the expressive for the argue language use. And then under it, it has some sample language features. And you can see here that your language function, create conjecture using definitions through, there's your language function. You see it here too. And then it provides you some sample language features that you might be able to target under it. So I would say this is an excellent resource. It's one I'm going to share with my content teachers to help them with those language features, because depending on how much time you have to collaborate with your ESL or your ELD specialist, they have to make those language features on their own. It could be challenging. So that's something you might want to share. Okay, and if you want to know the page number, it is the reference for the slide shows page 93 is for where that one is in the WIDA manual.
The link I have in my notes is wrong, so it's going to be just a minute.
Okay, I apologize, Ivana.
No, I'll find it.
Okay. Okay, Ivana is going to get that link to you, but just know that that's a support you can provide whether it's your ESL teachers or your content teachers, either one with those language features. Okay, so any questions so far? We are moving right along and we are doing so great. We're going to get those content objectives and language objectives. Okay, so let's put it all together now. Here is a language. What I'm going to give you is a language frame, a sentence frame that can be used to create a integrated content and language objective. It's going to combine the two. And this is a sample one. And I'm just going to walk you through the pieces, and then we're going to practice creating them. So as I look here, you see that I have students will be able to, which is the way we often start out standards. Some people might say I can. We will, however you phrase your objectives, but I have students will be able to, and then I'm going to insert my communicative mode. So it's expressive, okay, but I'm going to chop off the IVE and make it a verb instead of an adjective. So students will be able to express. Then I'm going to incorporate my content component, how magnets interact with iron objects. By is going to connect my language function. So by describing observations and or data. So I'm taking that straight from my language expectation. And just so that it reads fluidly, I am changing describe to describing with the ing. And then I'm going to add my language features, and I'm going to say using noun groups. So my integrated content and language objective would read, students will be able to express how magnets interact with iron objects by describing observations and or data using noun groups. Now, let's look at just the frame by itself. This is what the frame looks like by itself. Now we're going to try one. And then we're going to practice all together on a Jamboard to see how we can do. So we're going to start with our mapping document. We are going to locate a language expectation that is appropriate for our students, both their language proficiency and their grade level. So for our purposes, I have chosen the Explain Expressive for grades 2 to 3, because that's where my students are linguistically. I think that's a good focus. We are going to we're going to construct the social studies explanation that introduce phenomena or events. Next, I need to locate my communicative mode. So I'm going to see here the communicative mode is expressive. So now I'm ready to go to my STEM and insert. Students will be able to, my communicative mode was expressive in verb form, that is express. Students will be able to express. Next, I need to choose my content topic. So I'm going to look at my content topics. I might talk to my social studies teacher, and they might tell me, hey, we're talking about the principles of democracy. So I'm going to select my content standard that corresponds. And I'm going to take some of the language from the content standard and use it in my template. The easiest way to do this is to take after the verb. Most of the content standards begin with a verb. This one begins with explain. So I would take how principles of democracy have shaped the government. I might copy that. Then I'm going to insert that into my frame. So now my frame says students will be able to express how principles of democracy have shaped the government of America by, now I need my language function. I'm going to go back again. Where's my language function? My language function is right after the semicolon and my language expectation. So it's to introduce phenomena or events. Remember, as a reminder, the portion before the semicolon is the language expectation stem. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that into my frame so that it reads linguistically correct. I'm going to add ing to that first verb. So by introducing phenomena or events. So students will be able to express how principles of democracy have shaped the government of America by introducing phenomena or events using, we're almost there, all that's left is that language feature. So if language features are a struggle for me, I might go to my WIDA framework manual, might look under that language function, and I would see several that I could choose from, several sample ones that might help me get started. I would choose the one most appropriate for my multilingual learners, which might be prepositional phrases of time. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to insert that into my frame. At this point, I have a complete integrated content and language objective. Students will be able to express how principles of democracy have shaped the government of America by introducing phenomena or events using prepositional phrases of time and place. So this is how this frame works. All of the pieces, we walked through and we found all of the pieces using the mapping document. And of course, we had to supplement a little bit with our language features in the WIDA manual. So let's try another one. What we're going to do now is we're going to practice again. You're going to have a personal Jamboard that you can open up. You can follow along with me online if you'd like. The personal Jamboard might be helpful for you to practice some, but for technology ease, we're going to have you open a personal one. And we are going to have to hit make a copy. You should pull up a Jamboard that has your instructions here so you can reference that if you're practicing on your own. And then we're going to practice here with an actual clip or snippet from the mapping document for 4th grade. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to locate a language expectation in the mapping document. So here we see our language expectation for 4th grade, our 4th to 5th grade cluster, and we're going to find the language expectation. The language expectation is going to be right here. Next, I need to find my communicative mode. Actually, I'm going to go back to this. Next, I need to find my communicative mode. Oh, sorry. Okay, let's go back to the Jamboard. Next, I need to find my communicative mode, which is going to be right here. It's expressive. So now I'm going to go to my language objective, STEM, and I'm going to write expressive, but I'm going to make sure that I put it in verb form. So I'm going to say express. Go back. The next thing I'm going to do, after I find my communicative mode, is I'm going to locate the content standard that corresponds with the language expectation. So I have a choice of 2 here. These are math again. So if we look at this, we see I can choose explain a multi-digit whole number, or I can choose explain why a fraction is equivalent to another fraction. I have 2 choices, depending on maybe I check with my content teacher to see which standard they're working on. And I'm going to select one. Remember that you're going to omit, when you copy it, you're going to omit the verb. So I'm going to not use the verb. Okay. And then I am going to choose this one for our content standard. So I am going to put why a fraction is equivalent to another fraction. Now I need my language function. That's where I'm headed next. You find the language function for me. So find your language function, copy it, and paste it into your frame. Copy and paste it right here. Okay, I'm seeing a question in the chat box just really quickly about the language features and what page they are in the framework. They are divided. Just really quickly, they're divided by grade span, so they'll be on multiple pages. And again, I will be there. I can help you navigate that manual in our office time. Okay, so just enter someone copy and paste pretty quickly. Copy and paste in the chat box what language expectation verbiage you used. And Ivana just posted the office hours. Okay, explaining is going to be, let's look at our standard here. Let's go back to our standard. So if we're looking for our language function, remember the language function is going to come right after the semicolon. There we go, sharing solutions with others. This is our language function right here. Share solutions with others. So I would type that into my chat box and I would say, and I would make it ing. I'm going to add my ing, sharing solutions with others. Okay. Okay, wonderful. And then the final piece, the final component is we need to find some language features to support that language function. So let's look at what are some language features you think might support that function? Just in that you guys have done awesome with language features. What are some language features that might be needed to share solutions with other people? What kind of language would you teach? If you have some to share, causal connectors, comparisons, okay, numerator, denominator, okay. So I chose first person, I and we. I love the ones you guys have shared, precise language, those terms, numerator and denominator, using those words. We've got some connectors we could use. In this case, I chose first person, pronouns, I and we. When I put all of those together, that gives me my language feature. Now, there is a component of your artifact that asks you to write a language objective. We've practiced. We don't have time to give you time right now to do that, but we are going to head into our wrap up at this moment. Again, if you have questions, we've got just a few minutes left of our session. If you have questions, I would love to see you in our office hours today. Ivana posted that in the chat box. So, chat blast, what skills or tools do you feel you've gained during this session? So what skills, information, tools do you feel like you have learned or gained that you might use to collaborate or to integrate content and language into your instruction? Would you please type those in the chat box, but don't share them until I tell you to. Okay, I see some people sharing, so go ahead and hit send and oh, there they come. There come my blast. Familiarity with the document, how to write objectives. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words. A much better understanding of how to write content and language objectives. That's a difficult thing, guys. Absolutely. Sample templates that you can use during collaboration. Wonderful, you guys, so awesome. So excited to see such awesome things we're taking away with us. We also have, I'm also going to ask you to take a moment and share. I find that when we commit to something, if we share it with a group, with others, we tend to kind of hold ourselves accountable for it. So I'm going to ask you to think about an action that you might take that would help you integrate and collaborate using these standards for next year. What is some action you think I might do that might allow me to help these standards be integrated or to be able to collaborate with your peers using it? Type it in the chat box and just hit send. Work with other teachers, share with your L committee meetings, staff meetings, absolutely, professional development with your academic coach. In-person collaboration planning. Oh my gosh, these are lovely goals. I'm excited to see them. So now that we have committed to our action, what we have here are our office hours. They are from 3:30 to 4:30 today. Those are opportunities for you to practice with me, to ask in-depth questions, for us to go through resources, anything I might be able to support you with. Ivana has just also shared in the link for the PD evaluation. Please complete these. I think your certificate for attending is based on the completion of the evaluation documents. So please make sure that you click on the PD link that Ivana just shared in the chat box and give us your feedback so we can work on making this as beneficial as possible. Many, many thanks to you for sharing part of your summer with me. I hope to see some of you in office hours. Thank you for being such awesome participants.
And many thanks to you too, Chrissy. Thank you. Thank you guys for your patience and all the thank yous. That's awesome. I'm going to stop.